All right, people are still joining, but the numbers are slowing. And so I'm going to start things off with it in mind that we keep to the timeline that we have committed to. My name is Emily Orchard. I'm the Assistant Dean of Graduate Programs at the Faculty of Law at the University of Toronto. As a part of my role, I oversee the GPLLM, and I'm delighted to be here to speak to each of you about the program and the value of a legal education. We have, as you will see, with us today, our Associate Dean of Graduate Programs, Professor Malcom Thorburn, and Dean of the Faculty of Law, Professor Edward Iacobucci. We are also thrilled to be joined by 3 of our current students and 2 alumni of our program who are obviously uniquely positioned to speak to you about the value of the program in general and having regard to the work that they do specifically. Before we jump into the formal part of the event, I just want to touch on a couple of housekeeping things. We can't see any of you. You can see each of us. I know only that there are 60 some odd of you with us today, but we can't see or hear you. That doesn't mean, though, that we don't want to hear from you. And we are certainly keen to take questions that people either have submitted before the event or submit in the course of the event. If you would like to ask a question of anybody on staff or any of our students, please do so by submitting it by the Q&A. We will, in all likelihood, hold those questions to the tail end. And so if we're not answering them immediately, don't think that we haven't seen them and we're not monitoring that board. We're just going to preserve them to the end. And then at the tail end of the event, Jabeen and I are going to stay on and answer any additional questions that we don't get to with the panelists. We will also respond to questions outside of the event by email and are always available if anybody wants to have a conversation with any of us. Without further ado, I am going to introduce our Associate Dean, Malcom Thorburn, and Professor Ed Iacobucci, who is Dean of the Faculty of Law. They are going to play an integral role. You'll see me muted for much of the event. Dean Iacobucci is going to start off talking a little bit about the program, his vision for the program, the role that it serves at the law school, and the value of a legal education. Professor Thorburn, as I've said, is our Associate Dean of Graduate Programs. He woefully assumed that role, feels like minutes before the world collapsed in the face of COVID, and so he's had quite the introduction into the role. Professor Thorburn has been at the law school since 2013, and before assuming a role at our faculty, he was a professor at Queen's University and Canada Research Chair in Crime, Security, and Constitutionalism. He has a BA and JD from U of T, an MA from the University of Pennsylvania, and an LLM and doctorate in law from Columbia. Probably his Canada Research Chair has tipped you off, but his area of research and expertise is in a number of different fields, including criminal justice and public law, and that includes sentencing and policing and constitutionalism. And so we're thrilled both to have him involved with the graduate program, but with us today. Dean Edward Iacobucci is, as his title suggests, Dean, and James M. Torrey, Professor of Law. Professor or Dean Iacobucci has been with the law school since 1998. He has been dean for a number of years and woefully is winding down his term as dean in the next few months. Woefully from our standpoint, he can tell you whether he agrees with that sentiment. Professor Iacobucci has also a slew of degrees to his name, and so bear with me. He has a BA in economics from Queen's University, a master's in economics from the University of Oxford, and has his law degree from the University of Toronto. And so we are thrilled, obviously, to have both of them here. I am going to relinquish the floor to Dean Iacobucci, who's going to, as I say, talk a little bit about the program and the place that it occupies at the law school and the value of legal education.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Emily. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the GPLM. I'll start with the basic kind of nuts and bolts, but you will hear more about those. And then just set up how we think about the GPLM and what its value is and why it's an important program at our faculty. So the GPLM is one of Canada's first executive Master of Laws and one of the few executive programs with a degree granting program in a law school in North America. And we set up this program thinking that the study of law has something to offer everyone, including professionals for whom the ubiquity of law is a daily lived experience. So there are 4 concentrations in the GPLM, each of which focuses on particular areas of interests and legal focus. So there's a concentration in business law, innovation law and technology, Canadian law in a global context, and the law of leadership. Over the course of the program, students choose 10 courses, all but one of which, sorry, I should start again. There are 10 courses, all but one of which the students choose themselves. So students have the opportunity to curate a program that is responsive to their particular interests and needs. The program convenes Friday evenings and Saturdays on alternating weeks, which allows our students to continue to work full-time while enrolling in the program. So the objective of the program is to get our students to be able to think critically and strategically about law and legal issues with which they engage professionally. So you'll learn to think like a lawyer. Some of you enrolled in the program will indeed be lawyers, and hopefully will learn to think as better lawyers. For those without a legal background, it'll allow you to work more seamlessly with legal counsel. You'll learn how to identify, manage risks, and solve complex problems, and many more things. So what is the key to success for this program? It's really just getting great people in a room together. So it's putting some of the best legal minds in the country, indeed some of the best legal minds in the world, together in a room with sophisticated professionals, all of whom are eager to be there to learn, to challenge their understandings, to innovate, to move discussions forward. So our instruction in the classroom is academically and intellectually rigorous, which you'd expect from a law school like ours, but is also designed to ensure that our students have kind of some practical takeaways from the program as well. So at the end of the academic year, students will have spent several hundred hours immersed in the substance and methodology of the law, and will be equipped to apply a very different knowledge base and skill set and a mode of thinking to the work that we do. So in today's session, what we hope to do is set out, for those of you who are not lawyers, why the study of law is a valuable area of study, and why invest your time and energy in the GPLM in particular. Well, why is the study of law such a powerful education? First of all, leadership in every walk of life, including business, government, nonprofit sector, everything that we these days is surrounded by law and by regulation. And in many cases, there's more and more complex and more layers of law and regulation. Just take one example of privacy, right? No matter, just about any business that you're in, financial, health, online retailing, government, privacy regulation is going to have a significant impact on your day-to-day life. So it's become even more vital, I think, over time for business and other leaders to have an exposure to a legal understanding. Thinking like a lawyer is valuable for the knowledge that it brings about law and your capacity to interact with your advisors, including counsel, inside and outside counsel. But legal methodology, and this is something I really want to stress, legal methodology is useful not just in solving legal problems. And I'll look forward to hearing our panelists' perspective on this. But in my mind, one of the incredible strengths of legal methodology is its capacity to put order on complex and sometimes unruly sets of information that decision makers confront. This information is going to be the foundation for a decision, but it comes in a very disorganized, haphazard way. Law teaches one to organize that information, teaches you to categorize it, and it allows lawyers to isolate the key questions on which an ultimate decision will turn. That's, of course, makes for better lawyers, people who can think like that, who can bring that organizing principle and think carefully about why things should pivot when you've isolated the key points. But that's useful for solving problems in general, not just legal problems. So it's got a transformative, I think, effect on the way our students think about the world. I've had the privilege as dean over these past 5.5 years to speak with hundreds of our faculty alumni. Certainly we have a significant number practicing law, but we have a significant number of our alumni who are, and this is both JD and GPLM alumni as well. Certainly we have more JD because GPLM is a relatively new program. We have JD graduates practicing law, but we also have them leaders in all kinds of other fields, business, government, nonprofit sector, et cetera. And it's enormously gratifying for me as a legal educator to have the opportunity to hear from them about how valuable the law has been, the legal education has been, whatever they've ended up doing. So hearing a CEO say, I use my legal education every single day, even though I'm not practicing law, even though it may not be a legal problem I'm confronting, is, as I say, very gratifying as a legal educator. So to learn to think like a lawyer is to learn how to solve problems. So why the GPLM at University of Toronto? It's the best law school in the country. I don't think there's much debate about that. It's in the top 10 globally. The Times Higher Education rankings puts us in the top 10 globally. That's a good start. But as I said earlier, the key is that you're going to be immersed with some of the best legal minds in the country and the world, and you're learning with fantastic peers. I've taught in this program, and one of the things I love about it is the insights that people bring from their professional lives to the classroom. It makes for a really engaging and lively discussion. Just to give some sense of what your classmates will be like, this year we had certainly people who have practiced law in the past, but also entrepreneurs, doctors, police officers, chiefs of staff for municipality, heads of HR, senior staff from universities, lawyers, bankers, engineers, accountants, risk management professionals, and more. So it's that kind of potpourri of great legal educators, along with some pretty fantastic students that bring a lot to the table that makes this program particularly special. So I will stop there. I could go on, but I will stop there. It's kind of an occupational hazard as a law dean. But I'll stop there and turn things over to my colleague, Professor Malcom Thorburn, who will introduce our panelists for today. So thank you all again for being here. Malcom.
Thank you very much, Ed. Yeah, I just want to say welcome to all of you. I'm thrilled to be part of the GPLLM program. I took over only recently as Associate Dean in January of this year, but I've been teaching in the program for several years, and I will be doing so again this year, which I look forward to. It has been a great experience, and I have relished the opportunity to meet many of your predecessors in the program, and I relish the opportunity to meet you again this year. My task right now, though, is to introduce our really quite illustrious panel of alumni and students in the program. So I'd like to just tell you a little bit about their backgrounds before we come to some questions and answers. So first is Alfredo Tam. He is the first Chief Digital and Innovations Officer at WestJet Airlines, where his team is responsible for building a culture of innovation to transform the digital guest experience and improve commercial performance. He spent almost a decade as a former Facebook and Instagram executive, working in Canada, Asia Pacific, and Latin America. Previously, he was at Yahoo, MSN, and Bell Nexia. He's also an industry professor in strategic management at McMaster University. He's a member of the Leadership Council at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics. And he sits on Haskayne Business School Advisory Council at the University of Calgary. He's been featured in Forbes magazine, The Economist, and other leading publications on the topics of innovation, digital transformation, technology, strategy, and culture. Alfredo was a graduate of the University of Toronto, McMaster University, and the Harvard Business School. In addition to earning his GPLLM, he will be matriculating in the Master of Information and Data Science graduate program at University of California at Berkeley in 2021. Alfredo was also a member of the Young Presidents Organization. So welcome. Second is Paul Petrelli. Paul is currently the Senior Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer at Sun Life Financial. He is responsible for Sun Life's enterprise-wide regulatory compliance, market conduct, financial crimes, and privacy programs, and for leading a team of 300 compliance professionals located in North America, the UK, and Asia. He is also responsible for managing Sun Life's relationship with the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions. Paul is a lawyer and earned his LLB from the University of Windsor. Before joining Sun Life Financial, roughly 20 years ago, Paul was a lawyer at Torys LLP, where he practiced corporate law, M&A, securities, and real estate law. Next is Jasmine Cumberland. Jasmine is the Director Human Capital at NanoPay Corporation, where she is responsible for all aspects of human resources, including recruitment, onboarding, talent management, and development programs. And more recently, she is the company's COVID lead. Before joining NanoPay, Jasmine worked as the manager of human resources at Goodman's LLP and worked in management roles involving compensation and benefits and HR at Sony Pictures Entertainment, Sony Pictures Imageworks, and at KPMG. Jasmine also worked at Target during their first international launch into the Canadian market. Community engagement is incredibly important for Jasmine, and she currently serves as the president of the Simon Fraser University Alumni Association. Jasmine earned her GPLLM in Innovation, Law, and Technology just last year. She also has a bachelor's in Business Administration honors degree from Simon Fraser University, and she is a chartered professional in human resources and a senior certified professional in human resources. Next is Julie DiLorenzo. Julie is the president of Diamante Urban Corporation, a real estate development company and general construction contractor in Ontario. She has been an entrepreneur in the industry since 1982, during which time her company has repeatedly won the Greater Toronto Home Builders Project of the Year. Her biography for the current program year is more than 3 pages long, and that is just a synopsis. In addition to being responsible for developing countless prestige residential developments in the GTA, Julie has sat on numerous boards, participated in more events than one can count, and has received numerous recognitions for her excellence, including receiving the Build Industry Hall of Fame Award for her leadership in the real estate and development industry, and being the first woman to receive the Italian Chamber of Commerce Business Excellence Award. Next is Ritva Nosov. Ritva's underlying career thread has been to be a bridge between people and their potential. For over 20 years, she has had the privilege of working at the intersection of people and culture for organizations in Canada and globally. She is the founder and principal consultant with Talent Ed Consulting, Inc. She is known for her poise under pressure. She optimizes organizational design, talent development strategies, change and talent management practices, and organizational culture. She has extensive experience in advisory assessment, design and development, facilitation, consulting, and coaching services across a range of organizational development areas, with a specialized expertise on leadership development and cultural competence. Her credentials include an MBA in strategy from McGill University, a CTDP accreditation, PROSCI change management practitioner, and certifications in various psychometric tools. At the moment, she is completing an LLM with a concentration in the law of leadership in the Global Professional Masters of Law program at the University of Toronto. And I am thrilled to welcome all of our panelists. Now, my second task after introducing you to our illustrious panelists is to pose some questions to each of them. Many of these questions have been questions that some of you have asked, and I suspect that are on many of your minds. So this first question is really for all of our panelists. And it goes like this. So there are a plethora of executive programs from which each of you could have chosen. So why did you choose to pursue legal education at U of T? And that's for any of you.
I'm happy to go first if you'd like. So I think Dean Iacobucci already mentioned the caliber with U of T being the top law school in the country. So that was a draw. I certainly looked at several different programs. But when I started to delve into the professors who teach in the U of T GPLLM, I saw what they were teaching, but I also did some searching on what they did outside of the classroom. And it seemed to be very relevant for what I was seeing in the market. So that was really a huge draw for me. But I'll be honest, the other big one was flexibility. So I I'm technically in the law of leadership stream, which pertains to me professionally most. But I would say out of the 10 courses, half of them I've taken in the technology stream, as well as some business courses as well. Things that were super relevant for me with the clients I serve, but also for me actually as I'm building my business. So I love the flexibility. I love being able to curate a very customized program. And I really appreciate it. I did a lot of asking at all the programs I kind of visited, and I asked, you know, how much can I customize? Because at this point in my career and life, frankly, I didn't want to always be doing the exact same assignments, especially if they didn't pertain to me, who's a small business owner and entrepreneur. So I really appreciated the flexibility from the professors as well. Often when there was 2 choices and option C as give us a proposal that links with the content but is of more value to you, I often took that option C, and there was never a question. Once they accepted the proposal, I could write or research things that were super relevant to me. So those were the ones that really sold me. And then I came and audited a course. I came to visit last May cybersecurity, taught by Professor Imran Ahmed, and that was the final piece. Just being in the classroom, seeing the discussions and the interactions and activities, that's what kind of stood it up for the GPLLM for myself.
Okay, it's Julie. I can go ahead. Should I go ahead? No?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So I was, in my mind, studying law was never a question in my mind. I've been an entrepreneur all my life, and I've always seen that the law permeates every aspect, especially in businesses like mine that include finance, marketing, sales, law, politics, construction, engineering. The one thing in common is the discipline related to the law. The GPLLM program provided me something for all areas of that business. And as an employer, I would look very, very favorably upon GPLLM graduates. The program guided me through governing legal documents while also providing insights, both from the professors and through my peer group, of relevant examples and studies. The deep dive scope coverage is incredible for 1 year. Courses including intellectual property, competition law, corporate social responsibility, corruption, governance, blockchain, dispute resolution. I don't know how much money you would have to spend to obtain such guided knowledge anywhere else. All these courses highly relevant to an entrepreneur and provided me fundamental knowledge that allows me to be a better business leader. And also new courses like blockchain and courses that remind me about how intellectual property is managed from a legal standpoint provide me new business opportunities also. There was never a question in my mind that this was an amazing course for a business person.
Hi, so maybe I'll go next. I won't add to my other colleague commentary because I agree with all of that, but I will say that I do a ton of research whenever making a decision, even if it's something as simple as buying a pair of shoes, and this was certainly more than that. So I had spent months and months, and I had watched every video from the competitive landscape in terms of what else was available, including all the ones related to this program. And so that was super compelling in terms of all the things that I was hearing about the program. But I think the 2 other areas, one was the reputation globally is just unmatched by any other school in the country. And then lastly, most of the people in the program, I think, if not all, want to be here for no other reason than the learning experience that it offers. Meaning, in most other programs, it's either a way to get a job or to transition from one career to another. This one, people are here just because of the intellectual rigor, the legal education, and just the passion around learning. So that way, when the classroom comes to life, it's no other reason than everyone contributing to the experience. And there's no ulterior motive of trying to get a better grade to get a better job, right? So I found that valuable, that the intention of everyone there is they want to be there. There's no other reason why they're there. Like there's no forcing function for them to be there except desire to learn.
Thanks, Alberto.
I mean, I can speak to a few other comments. I definitely agree with everything that was said, and I was in that cybersecurity class that Rup mentioned. I think Paul was as well. But I'd actually had my eye on the GPLLM for, I would say, over 5 years. So I'd been based in Vancouver until 2018 when I took the role at Goodman's. And one of the first things I started to investigate when I found out that I was moving to Toronto was whether GPLLM admissions were still open and whether that was something I could pursue, because I'd been keeping up with this program for quite some time, but you know, it wasn't feasible to fly from Vancouver once a week to attend classes, or once every other week as the program is now set up. So having had a business undergrad and having had the opportunity to work at some really phenomenal companies, I was looking for a way to understand business from a little bit of a different angle. And I think Julie mentioned that, you know, legal certainly covers all aspects of business, as does HR in my opinion, but sort of having that opportunity to spend some time and to understand, you know, when we're talking with external counsel, what exactly they're talking about and why they're thinking through problems in a particular way was really important to me. But also when I think about, you know, the future of work, there's so many things being developed from a blockchain or an innovation standpoint, and so many programs that are, or, you know, businesses that are offering other businesses products along the way. I really wanted to understand what the baseline of that was. And I thought understanding it from a legal perspective would be incredibly important. So there was a great mix of standard legal type things that you would need to learn, but also from an innovation standpoint, you know, getting the opportunity to deep dive and think through how some of these new innovations would apply to HR in my case was incredibly important to me as well.
And Malcolm, I just want to, I'd like to amplify some of the comments that Dean Iacobucci made, because as you mentioned, I'm a lawyer, I'm already a lawyer, and I was called in 1997. But in the course of my career, I've actually, so 14 of those years I've actually spent outside of practicing law, even though I stayed as a licensed lawyer for that time. And so I've got a bit of the lived experience that Dean Iacobucci was talking about. I've worked in investor relations and capital markets. I've worked in finance. I've worked in operations within my company. And I remember when I was first preparing to leave the legal team, the law department at Sun Life, to go into investor relations at the time. And I went to our general counsel at the time and I said, I'd really like to do this. I'd like to learn more about how the company works, and I'd like to you know, think less like a lawyer. And he looked at me and said, yeah, actually what you want to do is take the thinking like a lawyer and apply it to what you're going to do now. And I kept that advice, and that's what I did. And so, you know, Dean Iacobucci talked about the power of a legal method, a legal analytical tool set. And I've used that in all of those different areas, and it's been incredibly valuable. It's exactly what the Dean said. It's the ability to pierce to the heart of the issue, really understand it, and then move to problem solving from there. And that worked in all those different environments. You know, I've worked with CFAs, MBAs, accountants, actuaries, engineers, process experts, and all sorts of other professionals and people who bring their personal experience from business and other things. And everybody brings an analytical tool set to addressing problems, but adding the legal approach, you know, to my mind, the legal method is among the most powerful and finest tools, and adding that tool to the kit of all the other capabilities that you may be bringing to this would make you an extremely powerful business problem solver. So so great experience. And then as for why the GPLLM, aside from the fact that one of my colleagues quipped that after 23 odd years, I'd finally gotten around to getting a law degree. The truth is the innovation stream in particular was for me extremely attractive. The opportunity to work with the faculty and the other members of the class on disruptive technology and really thinking about how applying a rigorous legal analytical frame to that was extremely valuable to me, and I think to my company as well. And the faculty is absolutely outstanding. I'll just add that the faculty is amazing.
Well, thank you all of you for those general comments. I have some specific questions for each of you. First question I have is for Alfredo. So you've spent your career immersed in large tech companies, where you've played an essential role in anticipating and managing innovation and change. So how has studying the law informed the work you do? and your ability to think critically about legal issues engaged by technological change?
Yeah, thanks, Malcolm. I mean, more than ever, I think if we didn't know it before, we certainly know it now, that the role technology plays in our lives is becoming increasingly indispensable. If anything, it's going to be even more transformative to society than we've ever seen. But what happens in parallel to that, which was sort of a blind spot for me, is as technology becomes increasingly the center point of our lives, it just means that the legal implications and the impact law and policy is going to have is just going to increase over time, right? So there's sort of a parallel growth trajectory of both. And frankly, prior to starting the program, everything that had any sort of legal implication, I would either defer to legal internal counsel or outside counsel, and I would be using them just for every single thing that related to a contract, even though there probably wasn't a need for it, just because I had no background in that area. And I look back on my long career in technology and just wondered how much more effective I could have been just having even the base knowledge of what has transpired in the last few months. So in terms of its impact, I think it's had tremendous impact, even in the short time period. I have a greater respect for the profession and what my counsel colleagues go through. And the conversations we have, whether it's partnership related, new product development, or any innovation in the areas like AI that we're exploring, I'm at least conversant in it in a way that I don't have to engage counsel on an almost weekly basis the way I used to. And then when we're having the conversations, I'm able to contribute in a much more meaningful way. So my only regret is I didn't do this sooner. And the other last comment around this topic is one of the professors, I think it was Ben, Professor Al-Rayari, had mentioned this, and it was, you sign up for the program, but then you're really not sure even when you start. But on opening class day, what he said was, the law is the operating system of society. And as a technology person, that just resonated so powerfully for me. So that sort of closed the loop on the application getting admitted and then going through the program to say, this makes total sense for me, especially in the innovation law and technology stream, because it's where I spend most of my career and probably will. And the laws just continue to play an increasingly important role there, if not a critical one.
Thank you very much, Alfredo. That was very helpful. I have a question for Jasmine. So as Director of Human Capital for a tech company, you're responsible for managing the company's recruitment, onboarding, talent management, and training programs. I presume that most of the work you do is robed in the law. So can you tell us about how studying the law has allowed you to approach your work with a legal lens? And having studied the law yourself and been convinced of its value, do you look for similar knowledge or breadth of exposure when you're hiring in certain positions as well?
Yeah, I mean, Alfredo, you touched on a few points that I definitely would have brought up here, just in terms of being able to understand, contracts are at the core of a lot of what I do in some cases. So there are definitely a ton of things where I can now do first drafts of contracts, or I can ask some very detailed questions of external counsel on some of the things we're doing, as opposed to just taking what's written and hoping that's the right thing along the way. Just by nature of my role, there's a number of regulations and legislation to be able to interpret and follow from a business standpoint and sort of relay that back to the business in a way that they can both understand, but apply in a way that works for them. I would say I definitely have more confidence now in representing the company on various legal matters from an employment standpoint. And in some ways I would call it, being able to fast track conversations that are happening, because we're not starting from an initial standpoint of here is what this definition means. It's me going, okay, well, I noticed that X, Y, and Z is missing from this contract. Is there a reason why that's happening? I would also say we have immigration issues that come up in our company. We have, recruitment pieces in my mind. From a recruitment standpoint, I've been actually able to answer both candidate questions of a more technical nature, which surprised me along the way. And then also, participating in interviews with some of our CTO, for example. I remember there was a time when they asked a candidate a particular question, and I was just sitting on the edge of my seat because I'm like, I'm ready, I can answer this question. And, prior to the GPLLM, I 100% would not have been able to do that. So I see that value along the way. And I also can ask questions of our tech team that apply some of the learnings from the GPLLM, in particular related to privacy and how we're applying something like GDPR when we think through our products and what that, excuse me, and what that looks like. You know, from looking for candidates with legal experience, we're a smaller company at the moment, so everyone wears multiple hats. So the more that someone can think through how different departments operate is obviously incredibly helpful to us. So someone having that legal background and understanding, you know, especially in certain roles, but sometimes surprisingly in roles you might not expect, is incredibly helpful, because then you're, again, not starting from that base with someone just running down a particular path, doing whatever they want to, and not thinking about the 10 steps back we're going to need to take because something didn't comply with, you know, some sort of regulation. That being said, I'm not expecting that everyone has, you know, that they're an expert level from a legal standpoint, but sometimes it's enough to say, I think there's something here that needs to be looked at, and just flagging that for, you know, either internal or external counsel to be able to review.
Well, thank you very much, Jasmine. I have a question for Paul. So as the Senior Vice President Legal at a large insurance company, you must be acutely aware of the ways in which technology is fundamentally changing the financial services and insurance industries. So can you articulate how the program provided space for you to think deeply about the disruptive technologies that are affecting your organization's operations? And also, was it instructive to have the opportunity to learn alongside non-lawyers and professionals from a number of different sectors?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Malcolm. It's a great question. So I work for Sun Life Financial. It's a big life insurance company here in Canada. It does life insurance, but it also does, you know, helps clients with wealth and other needs. And a company like ours really knows our customers quite intimately. We have their financial information, like a lot of other financial institutions will, but as an insurer, we also have their health information. Because we provide employee benefits to about 6 or 7 million Canadians, we have a lot of interactions with them at the workplace. And so that tells you a lot about what's happening in people's lives. For example, we often know when people are getting married, when they have children, or when they retire. So we have quite a lot of information about our customers, and we know them really well. And over the past few years, as the power of this data has become more evident and the digital tools to deploy it more effectively have grown, our industry, like many, have been innovating largely based on this new digital access to data. So lots of innovation going on, lots of information about our clients. Now, our people at Sun Life are good people, and they're very well intentioned. And when we innovate with the idea of what's going to benefit our customers. We're very customer focused in that way. We think about how we can use digital tools and data to make doing business with us easier and to be more relevant to our customers. But we have to recognize, and we do recognize, that there can be pitfalls with this, and that we're stewards of this information, and we have to be very careful about how we do things. So just to give you an example, we underwrite life insurance. And so the old traditional way of underwriting life insurance is that somebody will come to your house and they'll take, it's often a nurse practitioner, will come and take bodily fluid samples, and that'll be part of the underwriting process. It's intrusive and can take a long time. It's not really a great experience for our clients. So we're looking at, you know, how can we use data in different ways to simplify underwriting? And so, for example, there's a lot of information readily available out in the public realm about people. Example of Facebook. Now, not that Sun Life uses Facebook information. In fact, we specifically do not. But just to give you the example, you know, you can learn a lot about people through what's available digitally. And so the question comes, should we use that information? Should we use that information in underwriting our life insurance? But if we do, could that disadvantage some customers? Could that be unfair to them? So, you know, the questions we have to ask ourselves is, how can we use digital and data capabilities to achieve the benefits that we want for our customers, but do it in a way that's fair? So to me, that's the real value of something like the GPLLM. lawyers are trained to think about fairness. This is something that Alfredo mentioned, that Professor O'Leary said. We're trained to think about fairness both among individuals and at the societal level. It's the operating system for society. So for me, spending a year looking at the new technology, specifically through the legal lens, has been invaluable in the role that I have at the company and helping shape, making sure that we're being fair to our customers, our current customers, our prospective customers, and how we use their information. And I think that's been valuable to the company too, because there's it's not good to innovate in something that then turns out over time not to have worked well for either for our individual customers or society more broadly. And then, I just want to reemphasize the quality of the faculty and the other students in the class, coming from all walks of life and a wide array of experiences and perspectives. That truly enriches the experience, and it really made the learning for me much, much, much stronger.
Thank you very much, Paul. I have a question for Julie. So as a business leader, have you seen any shifts over the past 10 years in the importance of legal expertise for business leaders? And has the legal knowledge and expertise that you've gained in the program changed how you approach your work? Are there specific skills that you developed in the program that you may not have been as comfortable flexing before pursuing this degree?
Absolutely. I'd say the business environment has never shifted more rapidly, even before COVID. Imagine that we're judged by quarterly earnings when few businesses should think in quarters if they want to be successful in the long term. So my project, for example, lasts 5 to 7 years and have to weather uncertainty on a daily basis. Legal analytical thinking provided the appropriate backbone, the discipline, and the methodology in dealing with information and problems. Being knowledgeable in the law also allows me to defend interests and to advocate with confidence. When Dean Iacobucci discussed legal methodology, he pinned the issue in my business. Most entrepreneurial businesses are crisis management by the day. The discipline of legal methodology is enormously beneficial in organizing and prioritizing the issues, and importantly, in anticipating issues. So can I keep going? Because I've absolutely loved what this has done for my business and for business on a larger scale in terms of what I can do for the community. The program's relevant. Look at, for example, a competition class, we study monopolies, abuse of power, the principle of efficiencies. With COVID, there's obviously been further aggregation of that power. Now, we're saying, what would big tech's or Amazon's power have to do with my business? Well, when the retail storefronts are decimated, they decimate the municipal tax base. When the municipal tax base is decimated, that tax burden shifts onto other businesses. So although some of the things may seem to be high level and academic, they absolutely aren't. You pull the thread and they have a direct application into most of what every business person does. So I'm not sure if it's funny, but I'm reading the Competition Act for enjoyment now. So you pull the thread on corporate social responsibility. Every woke company is speaking about their contribution and obligations to society in COVID and in the anti-discrimination discussion. Pull the thread on what duty a corporation has when thinking about our crisis on the environment. We had these discussions in class with the backbone of the legal documents. Suddenly discussions about who is the stakeholder in the corporation is common language. With the GPLLM, I read the documents with greater confidence, assess the information impacts, and prepare my business before those impacts can occur. It's made me a better, stronger leader and a better board member. Every day, we're tested with issues, and the law is providing us a backbone and a methodology in which to approach those circumstances. I feel greater confidence and very happy to now be at the decision-making table when legal statutes are even being changed, as opposed to often businesses reacting. Now we have the ability, and I'll have the ability to be at the table to help guide those outcomes.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think COVID is reminding us all just how interrelated all of these issues are. I have a question for Ritva. So as I understand it, your motivation for pursuing the GPLLM was both personal and professional. So personally, you've had a long interest in the law and legal studies. And professionally, you were keen to develop a better understanding of the frameworks and tools required to assess complex workplace situations from a legal perspective. So having studied employment law and harassment, discrimination, and the duty to accommodate, among others, do you feel more confident now about providing advice and guidance to the senior leaders with whom you work?
Yes, I would say wholeheartedly yes. So you touched on the personal thing, and you're right. So I wrote about that in my application. It's been 20 years I had wanted to study the law. I guess kind of what Alfredo mentioned, the operating system of society. So I felt I had a huge blind spot there. And so that was it's been a huge personal goal of mine. But it's been interesting professionally. So in the last few years in particular, since I started my own business, increasingly seeing, people touched already on the complexity of business, the pace, globalization, technology, and then you insert the people stuff in there. And I always say people are messy, and I mean that in a good way, right? And so I was increasingly getting questions about, especially from HR and people operations, which is generally where I work, and from senior leaders about those types of questions. I was getting questions about it, from small tech startups who are some of my clients, but interestingly and surprisingly for me was also these questions were cropping up as much from larger scale mature organizations too. It was just getting so complex. So being able to answer those questions has been great instead of having to reach out to my legal contacts or do a lot of research. But it's also been helpful when I teach, because I do facilitate a lot, especially to senior leaders, and explaining to them, hey, these are some of your legal rights, and translating the law for them so they understand, well, what does that mean in your day-to-day and how you manage and how you lead. And so it's also something going forward in what I designed in my content is now increasingly getting a larger role than it used to. So that context has been such a value add. In terms of the advisory, I'd say, it's been helpful when we're planning and looking ahead, being able to say to my client, hey, have you thought about this? No, we haven't. From the legal angle, well, here's why you need to, and here's why it might be a risk if you don't. And so that's also very, very beneficial. And I've been increasingly asked over the last few years to conduct workplace investigations, not a fun exercise, but definitely a needed one. And so being able to understand how they should be done and why, and again, having that context has given me more confidence, and I'd frankly say probably a better result, for the client. I will say though, it was a surprise for me, was for my own business. Like I thought I'd take away a few things from the education, but I took away a lot more for myself for trying to build a business. So I first met, I was kind of seated next to Julie a lot in IP, which is one of the first courses we took, and hugely beneficial for me, just because I design a lot of content and understanding the playing field. Jasmine spoke about contracts. I draft my own contracts, and understanding that, hugely beneficial as well for me. So that's been a nice extra bonus. Understanding that from my own business perspective. And even when I teach and do some volunteer work with professional newcomers to this country, understanding their rights as employees in Canada, and being able to teach that and integrate that into some of my workshops. Again, a lovely little extra added bonus for me. So it definitely permeates into the operating system of society, and it's definitely permeated into bigger parts of myself, my world, than I even expected.
Malcolm, there are a couple of questions that have been submitted on the board, and Malcolm has another question that he wants to put to all of you, but I'm wondering if everyone is okay if I ask a couple of Q&As from attendees before time gets ahead of us. The first one is, if legal thinking is the major strength of the program for a lawyer joining the program, how strong and valuable is the innovation and technology aspect of this LLM? In other words, is the LLM more valuable for non-lawyers who want to incorporate legal considerations when applying technology and innovation to their operations? I'm assuming that may be from somebody who's a lawyer, and so Paul, maybe you can speak to your view on that question as somebody who has a legal background, and then I open it up to anyone else, Alfredo, for example, on the kind of tech side of things.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So that's a great, I love that question, because so lawyers are often trained to think about the risk in a particular way. And so we're quite good at that. And, but often sometimes we're a bit myopic about the opportunity side of things. And so what a course like the GPLLM does, and in particular both the faculty and the other people in the class, is it takes you outside of that strict risk box and starts to and encourage you to think about what are the opportunities here. And so you know, for example, when you look at blockchain and that kind of thing, you know, lawyers might look at that and say, well, you know, does that you know, what's the purpose of that? How does that, how might that work effectively in a given, you know, particularly a finance environment? But then, you know, then hearing from the other members of the class about how you could use blockchain to innovate in the way that companies deliver services to their customers in amazing ways, in ways that would really benefit the customer, it really opens your eyes. So it causes you to shift your thinking. It really does. And to understand those opportunities. Now, the benefit of the legal frame is that, again, I mentioned this concept of we innovate and our people are well-intentioned in the innovation, but what I've observed sometimes is that when well-intentioned people are innovating, there's a bit of motivated thinking that happens around it. There's a belief that if we do it this way, it's going to benefit our customers and it's going to benefit us, but they may themselves be a bit myopic about the downside for the customer. And so the legal training drives you to really think about all aspects of it and drive to the heart of it. And so you might be able to identify, well, you know, there might be some risk here for our clients, or this may not work out as well. So it really improves the innovation because you bring that perspective. But if you're engaging in that discussion with your business partners, or you're directly involved in creating that product, if you're only thinking about the risk, you're missing the opportunity. You're not serving your clients well. So I do think there's really that aspect, and it was very valuable for me personally.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that. I think the content is so great, even if you have a background in the legal method and the legal way of thinking, that the content is great from a technology and innovation perspective, that it would be helpful in any organization you're in. So the way I think about it is, if my external and internal counsel had some of the knowledge on the technologies that are discussed, that Paul was talking about, everything from blockchain to machine learning and AI, it would just, and cybersecurity, it would just make the conversation smoother because they would have a base understanding of what's about to happen. So I actually would say that it's even more valuable for people that have the legal training, because now they can add the other side, which is the depth of the content. And of course, you can find all these sources of information on YouTube, or you can just Google it. But what the program does is it provides structure around very complicated topics. For example, you can do as much research as you want on blockchain, but the way it's presented allows you to learn it to the point where you're like, I'm now conversant. Even if you have a background in engineering and computer science, we still found a ton of value in the content, in the way that it was structured and the way that we learned it. So I don't think it's just the legal methods that's the strength, it's the quality of the conversation and debate in the class, because so many people have different experiences within the technology stream, but also just the structured way of how you learn it. So you can take it from day one, what is the simplistic, like what's the most simple way to explain blockchain, all the way to writing a paper that says, here's the implementation in a specific industry.
Thank you,
Hi.
Alfredo.
If I can add something on the blockchain, being a real estate expert, if you got a blockchain expert, they stay in that silo. If you have a legal expert in blockchain, they stay in that silo. We were able to collaborate in terms of applied aspects of blockchain. Otherwise, blockchain won't penetrate if we're not dealing with other experiences in business. For example, we were allowed to talk about the effect of blockchain on real estate, the largest asset group held in the world. And it was the collaborative discussion that was incredible. I mean, blockchain for me was a challenge because I'm not a technology person, but it was a benefit when we were able to share the practical aspects of what needs can be solved by blockchain in our business.
Thank you, Julie. Another question that has come in from a participant: is there a course that you took that really surprised you, and why? E.g., why did you get more out of it than you expected?
I can comment on this one to start with. Cybersecurity stood out as a course that definitely surprised me. So I worked at Target Canada, and Target in the US had suffered a pretty massive security data breach. I joined Sony Pictures Entertainment just after they had a massive cybersecurity breach. And for context, when I joined Sony, like we weren't allowed to go on the internet, basically. We could access Gmail, but pretty much any other website you had to whitelist if you had a reason to do that, but you certainly couldn't do things because they were still trying to figure out how that all came to be. And so in cybersecurity class, I actually got to reflect on some of those experiences in great detail, I would say. But further than that, got to study some of our course content and understand different frameworks for security that some of these very large companies, targets the Fortune 50, that they should have had in place at that point in time. And so now at my current company, I think I must have ran back after one weekend of class to our CISO and been like, okay, I've got like this understanding of how, it's called the NIST framework, but how the NIST framework applies to different things. I'm currently part of our information security group that looks at security across the entire organization, but being able to deep dive into how some of those framework pieces apply to HR specifically was pretty eye-opening for me, I would say. And then I have that lens now and a deeper understanding to be able to contribute to that overall, that oversight group for information security in the company. So I don't think going into cybersecurity, I'd really thought through that that's what I'd be walking out with, but I did find that to be incredibly helpful.
Thank you, Jasmine. Anyone else care to, Alfredo?
Yeah, for me, it was the intellectual property class. I didn't think I would find trademark, copyright, and patent law in the least bit interesting. So my expectations were really low. I can't believe how much I enjoyed the class, the discussion. The classes are long. I think I can't remember, it's like 4 or 5 hours long, but it was the one class where you would go in and the 4 to 5 hours would just blow by. And as a technology person, I never knew that I would find that interesting. The 2 professors that taught it were spectacular, very little slide work. It was all case and debate and learning from the rest of the class as well. So that one was shocking to me, that I didn't think I was going to enjoy that as much as I would, on top of the incredible amount of knowledge that was now super relevant in the tech industry.
Yeah, I can also weigh in. One of my, I would say, top 3 classes, the one that surprised me the most was a course called Taxonomy of Innovation. So you don't know what that's about, and I certainly did not. So it was taught by Professor Dara Nevin, and it was a December intensive course. So we spent all day during the weekends in this, and we thought, uh-oh, I don't know how this is going to go. But the breadth of what she covered was incredible. So in terms of what was happening out there. So for me, the autumn semester was really about understanding, well, what are the laws? How does it work, in IP, for example, or contracts? And so this was so refreshing, because in December we stepped out and she said, well, here's what's happening in the world, in the legal field. And for someone like her who works right in the thick of innovating it, it was amazing to get her perspective. And for myself, it was interesting to say, okay, well, here's the area I can maybe play in. And to have some advice and some direction. And so I walked out with so much just in terms of knowledge, perspective, and frankly, resources thanks to her. So, and the days go by, could have spent even more time with her in that course. It was a fantastic course.
I hope everyone's ears are burning out there. Certainly Dara is beloved, I would say, across our faculty. For sure. Does anyone else want to touch on that before I ask another question?
It's Julie, I can. I would say that it's my perspective that the corporate form is under scrutiny like never before. Capitalism is being examined like it's never been examined before. So corporate social responsibility and competition courses for me were a buzz, in addition to some of the others that were described like IP, but in particular competition law, because antitrust is a discussion that is very relevant and now becoming a common discussion. But the corporate social responsibility was almost haunting, because it was the application of what legal enabling legislation exists for the corporation, and is it enough any longer for the corporation to be mandated, or should the corporation be mandated at all to be engaged in corporate social responsibility, and should that role be given back to government? It is relevant. It is an urgent discussion for business, and it really was probably one of the most important things I've done in a very long time.
Thank you. There are a couple more questions coming in, but I think the last question that Malcolm wanted to ask the panelists is a common one. And so I want to make sure we get to that, and then I will pick up the Q&A again.
Yes, yeah, this is for all of our panelists, because I think it applies to each of you in different ways. So all of you have incredibly demanding professional lives. So I'd like to ask you each to describe how you were able to negotiate the problem on top of all of those existing commitments that you have. Who would like to take a shot at that? Start.
Maybe I'll go first on this one. I actually didn't know how to negotiate the time on this one that and Emily and Jabin know this, I actually asked to defer the program. And because I really couldn't figure out how I was gonna manage it with my 3 jobs, my personal life and my other things that were going on. But I have to say the 2 of them were phenomenal. I'm happy to share just how great the administration is on this program. And then someone said this to me on the side. They, as I was planning to defer it, they said to me, what makes you think you're gonna have more time next year? What makes you think you're gonna be less busy next year? And I thought about that. I mean, that's a pretty simple question, but I didn't contemplate it. But number 2, the topics were so not intrinsically interesting to me anyways. I would be studying most of the content that is being covered, especially in the stream that I was in, but there would be no structure, there'd probably be no discipline, and they would probably just fall by the wayside. So for me, the combination of the flexibility and the passion from the administration, it was just a great sign of what the program could be. Number 2, I was just naturally interested anyways. And if it's important to you, you're going to find a way to make time. And magically, I have, right? So it didn't seem possible at the time, but it certainly is very doable. So I think those were the 3 drivers around what convinced me to finally pull the trigger on it. But in terms of making time, if it's important enough, you'll make time. And again, it is really great content, and the world is shifting so quickly, regardless of which industry you're in. This is the stuff you should be doing, even if you're not in the program, but now there's a structured way to learn it.
I'm happy to weigh in, or Julie, do you want to go ahead?
Well, I was just going to say that if your 12-year-old makes you dinner, know that Doritos are going to make it into the mac and cheese. So that's from a practical standpoint, you really need a lot of cooperation and from your peer group and your work environment and your family environment, but it's very manageable. The key is consistent application. You get your reading materials in advance, you understand when your due dates are, so you block the time in and you apply yourself consistently. And as Alfredo said, if not now, when? It was apropos, it was relevant, it was actually energizing me even in my own business. The workload exists, but it's manageable because it's organized and the support staff is extraordinary.
Yeah, when I heard this question, I just think of the word trade-offs, right? Because when you take on anything, you can't have it all. So something has to give. So there's always trade-offs. So in my case, if I looked at, okay, what's going to be traded off professionally, I have a newer business, so I had to reduce my expectations on myself in terms of things like business development. I'm not going to have the time, energy, or frankly, the money to do as much, or I'm not going to be where I thought I would be at this point in growing it. And also with clients, asking for more flexibility was key. Personally, absolutely. You know, I don't have children, but I look after aging parents, and I have a disabled sister up in Northern Ontario. So having to reduce the time I could go up there, trying to find workarounds of helping to look after them from distance was part of it. You know, talking about scheduling, my partner's schedule definitely fell behind mine, and we made some compromises around that throughout the year. And so he's just as happy to be seeing the kind of finish line after a very intense year. And then it went down to the how, really, the rituals. It's kind of like, okay, well, what rituals have served me well when I've undertaken something big like this in the past? What's serving me well now? And I actually did some research in the week before the program launched. I looked at more students who graduated from 4-year law and what they blogged about and what they said. How do you study the law? What was coming out as the best practices? So I kind of pulled out a couple of those and said, okay, I'm going to try some of these, experiment with them. And then throughout the autumn semester, it was a lot of trial and error. So every month, the first day of the month, I'd step back and say, okay, well, this month, what worked well or what totally did not? And what's the one thing I'm going to tweak for next month? And so a lot of just trial and error. The human brain is wired We now know scientifically to underestimate how much time things will take, especially when you're starting out. So there was a lot of figuring that out. So the autumn semester for me was trial and error. And then things kind of settled into a rhythm in the winter semester. I kind of got into a good approach for myself. I knew what worked, what didn't. And it got a little bit smoother, let's say, starting in the winter semester.
I mean, one thing that stands out is coffee, of course. I wasn't really a coffee drinker before the program, but certainly partway through the program, that was helping to fuel a few things along the way. There was, some sleep loss somewhere along the way. Obviously different roles have different busy seasons, and in some cases you just know, and in advance because you've got the course schedule, you've got the readings, the assignment due dates, and what your work life sometimes looks like along the way. So in some cases you just know, this particular month or these few weeks are just going to be busy. So in some cases you figure out how to prioritize. So something that I would look at is if I was really interested in 2 courses that were being offered at the same time through the program, in some cases I'd look at, where did due dates for assignments fall, or how much group work was required, or if we knew in advance sort of what did the reading load look like for some of these. And in some cases that would help inform the course I took if I knew I was in a particularly busy or challenging time at work. So just thinking through how to help balance the schedule that way. And then in some cases, some of the readings were quite lengthy, and in some cases you wouldn't be able to get through all of them in a week. So it's a matter of prioritizing, which topics do you know least about in my case, and spending the time on those topics, and probably doing like a quick scan of some of the other topics that were going to be discussed, because I had to realize that I couldn't be, I had to be easy on myself as well in terms of, doing a full-time, plus job, having a role on a board, and also doing this program. There's balances to be made and trade-offs to be done. So just thinking through ways that for you that work best to be able to balance those pieces was how I was able to get through that.
I'll just quickly mention, I echo Alfredo's comments. The administration is fantastic and very helpful and accommodating, and so are the profs. So the profs will, listen to the class when when there are challenges on due dates and other things like that. So there's some reasonable flexibility around that. So that really makes a difference. But I would say the biggest help is are your classmates. So you've got a natural support network with your classmates. Helping work through the time demands, the assignment demands, understanding what's happening. So I found my classmates to be the biggest support network, in addition to my family, of course. But it really helps. We're all, everybody's in it together, and there's a lot of help being passed around among the group.
Thank you, Paul. I know, Emily, you have a few more questions from the Q&A from our participants today, don't you?
I do. Before I jump back to the Q&A board, I know Dean Iacobucci has to leave momentarily, and so I want to make sure, Ed, if there's anything else that you'd like to say before you leave, you have an opportunity to do so, and otherwise just a thank you for joining us today. No,
it's been a pleasure for me to join, and I really want to thank the panelists. It's very energizing for a dean to hear this kind of discussion around the program, and it just kind of confirms viscerally what I know intellectually. So it really is a treat to hear you all. So thank you for doing this. I apologize for having to leave shortly. You'll all be shocked to hear that there's a COVID-related meeting at the university that I have to join. It's something that's become a part of all of our lives, I'm sure. But again, thank you, and thank you, Emily and Jabin, for putting this together, and Malcolm for moderating. But it was a pleasure to listen to you all. Thank you.
Thank you. So I am watching the clock for everybody else as well. We have about 15 minutes left. Thumbs up with our panelists if you guys are okay to answer a few more questions. Wonderful. Let me just flip back to the board here. There is a question, I suspect, I'm happy to have anybody answer this, but my guess is that it may be a question to which you are uniquely positioned to answer, Alfredo. For people having a background on artificial intelligence and machine learning and computer science, how redundant would the content be?
I would say there's very little redundancy. So there's not a lot of technical depth to the program because it's a law school, not an engineering school. So There are some areas where there has to be base knowledge for all the participants to participate in, right? So for example, in blockchain, there'll be some fundamentals around that. In the AI machine learning, there'll be some baseline knowledge that people are given through the classes. But I would say there's probably no overlap between computer science engineering and what's being taught. The way to think about it is, how do you take what you know from a technology perspective, then add the legal lens to it, right? What is considered an autonomous killing machine when the button is pressed? Is it when the person presses the button or when the action's actually taken? So I would say that if anything, someone with a computer science and engineering background would actually find more value, because it's not a lens that you're taught from a technical perspective, right? So much of the things that we learn as technology people, we seldom put the legal, privacy, regulatory, or sort of morality hat on. And this program allows you to investigate those areas that you wouldn't be able to investigate in a raw technical program.
Thank you.
Although I can't speak to the technology side of it, but I just would say the way to think about it maybe is that what the courses really do is talk about what economists call the externalities around what you're doing. So if you're a computer scientist or a technologist, you're often very focused on solving the engineering problem that you've got in front of you, to get from A to B to put out the solution that you're trying to achieve. What these courses do is ask you to step back and look at how that solution or that activity is impacting everything else that's going on around you in the world, people who are using it, people who aren't using it. And that's I think the real value at having talked to some of the people within my own company who are on the enterprise services and technology side. It's that's a perspective that helps inform how they're approaching their problem solving.
Thank you. Both before today's event and on the Q&A today, we've had some questions about what the fall is going to bring by way of delivery of our courses. And of course, I wish I could answer that with any degree of specificity. What I can tell you in part is stuff that each of us will know, and some of it is new perhaps. The province has begun its reopening stage. Woefully, the reopening is happening at a less feverish pace in Toronto than it seems to be elsewhere in the province, but we are migrating into stage 2. We don't know, of course, what that means, where we'll be in terms of our ability to congregate in groups come September. But the faculty and the university, indeed, in its entirety, are planning for any number of options. If it is possible for us to convene in person, we will be ready to do so. That may not look as it did this year. Our expectation is that in-person gatherings will have lots more cleaning, more space between chairs in the classroom, things of that sort, but we will be ready to meet in person should public health authorities permit. We're also anticipating that it may be necessary either to have courses delivered in a hybrid fashion, which means that in some cases we will be able to convene in person, either for the kind of more social activities and or for classes. But we may also need to be online, and that could be online just as a matter of course. In some cases, it could be that we have a second wave, which seems to be largely taken for granted in the discourse, and we'll see ourselves moving things online. There are, of course, conversations happening daily. Dean Iacobucci has left, I imagine, to participate in those conversations again today. And so we're keeping our finger on the pulse, both in terms of what's happening and what will be permitted from a public health standpoint, but also how the university is navigating those tensions. And the information, to the extent that we have it, is posted on we have a kind of COVID landing page in which we will make updates regularly available. So I think the kind of follow-out question from that is, what does it look like if discussion and rigorous discussion in the classroom is one of the kind of key attributes and values of the program? What does that look like if those discussions are happening on Zoom rather than in a classroom? And so Ritva and Alfredo, without kind of putting you under the bus, We closed, as did much of the world, in March. Students had been convening in person until then, and we moved online quite quickly. And so I wonder if you guys can talk a little bit about what your experience has been with the classes online.
Yeah, I mean, nothing replaces the in-person experience. So I'm stating the obvious here. However, there are a ton of benefits about the online experience that I think have helped tremendously. For most of us, work did not get slower, it got busier. So to a certain extent, not having to do the commute, being at home with my family and my friends immediately before and after class was great. And the quality of the content has not gone away. The quality of the sort of engagement with my peers has not gone away. It's not perfect and it's not as good as being in person, but I'm not sure I have felt a dramatic decrease in the experience. And I've told Emily this, I think in the future, the hybrid model is going to be the one that evolves anyways from even the most elite of schools. So I think the online experience is just going to be part of the program, hopefully moving forward, even when COVID does come to an end. So I'm not sure for me, it has had a dramatic decrease in the quality of the experience. And I don't think it should if things are done well, and the quality of the discussion, the debate, and even the projects on the side that we have to do, I'm not sure it was diminished by moving completely online.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think I agree with Alfred, that the hybrid model is the way of the future. I think there was pretty seamless transition in March. We kind of COVID unfolded towards the end of the winter semester, and so all of a sudden we were thrown into Zoom classes, and obviously we missed seeing our classmates. It was kind of a rhythm we were used to, having dinner, lunch together, and all of the little side chats in particular. But I think it's been pretty seamless. I do see in this current semester, we're in the summer semester right now, I see like a real effort being made by professors to make it more interactive and to have breakout activities, a lot of discussion and things like that do help, because they are long chunks of time in the classroom, but also frankly online as well. So I think it's been done very well. And I think, with our group work, we just had a group meeting last night, again, it's done through Zoom. We've been able to work really well together and very efficiently for a big group project we have coming up. And my classmates in the Law of Leadership, I mean, we're having after class drinks on Saturday, right? So at 6:30. So that hasn't gone away either. The channel is a little different, but the connection is still the same.
Thank you both very much. We have a question around technology, and I'll be brief in that. On the COVID landing page, there is a question specifically about that. What kind of technology do you need in order to engage in classes, should it be necessary for them to take place online? There was a kind of a specific subset to that question: iPad, Mac, desktop. My guess is, without knowing definitively what all of our students are using this year, is that there's a whole host of different tech being used. I've seen people who are accessing lectures with their phone. There are people on iPads, there are people on Surfaces, there are people who have desktops. But in terms of what kind of caliber of machine do you need, we have mapped that out as an institution. And that's available online. And Michael, I think if you were still with us and you can't find the answer to that question, please feel free to let us know, and we're happy to take that offline. There's another question about kind of what have you most enjoyed and least enjoyed about the program? Did you enjoy, are you enjoying for current and former students? Does anybody want to touch on that?
I'll start off, and again, I've really enjoyed my classmates. It was just outstanding. I felt I said this a couple of times coming in the room. Hi, second family, or maybe I called them third family after the work family and the home family. Building those connections, getting to know people. I looked forward to every conversation, every time somebody raised their hands or sometimes didn't raise their hand and chimed in with a view on something. It was fascinating to me, and so enjoyable. And it was, again, it enriched the experience so well. So that to me was really stood out, are the people that I met and got to know. over the course of the year. And then, like, again, I'll say again, the faculty is just outstanding. I mean, you're the privilege of being able to hear and learn and have those after class or between class chats with some of the truly leading experts on some of these questions, not just in Canada but for the world, is it's a true privilege, and I really appreciated that.
I can speak, I mean, Paul definitely did walk into class and speak about the family side of things. I can confirm that. But, aside from those particular pieces, I really appreciated the flexibility in both being able to select the courses that were interesting or relevant to me and what I wanted to get out of the program, but also to the topic, the thought of being able to research and have that time, like forced time to have put aside to be able to research topics that are going to be incredibly relevant to me in my career or my industry or for my company in what's going ahead. And so I really appreciated that side of things. Probably one of the more challenging things was, classes on Saturdays were from 8:30 to 6:30 p.m. And that's a long day for anyone, but when you're engaged in discussion and you're there with, people that then become friends along the way, it flies by fast, but sometimes at the end of that Saturday, you're just like, I'm exhausted. Like, I need to go home, need to sleep. And I have a 1 weekend day ahead of me at this point. So I've got to cram everything into there to get ready for the next week. So, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's a challenge, it's a challenge for a fixed period of time. So, I felt like it was pretty easy to deal with.
Anyone else have anything that they want to?
Sure, I can pop in. It's Julie. I would say that what was amazing is that the material is so current. You don't expect that to be part of law studies, but you did study the law, but you studied in a current context. You were given case studies that were relevant. They were applied. You could read in the newspaper one morning and go back and be studying the same thing at school that day, but from an academic standpoint, and from a practical standpoint, because it was a current event. Great material, and again, great professors who are top in class.
I can chime in there as well. I would agree. It's a double-edged sword. So much amazing content and caliber teaching, and then we had a lot of guest speakers, which was a wonderful surprise, who work in the field, and I really enjoyed that in all of my classes. The other side of that sword then is so much at you at one time. So so many times I wish I had more time to just digest this, but had to move on because there were other things kind of flying at you. So that's the double-edged sword, double side of the coin, with it being such an intense program.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I think, and Emily and Jabin know, I'm hypercritical of academics as a whole, because it's typically rooted in the past. And the value of this program, I found it was a great balance between the academic research that, from people that hold, PhDs and advanced degrees, and then you couple that with people that have real world experience, so they understand the pain point of what it's like in the real world. And I just love that balance, right? Because I think both have to happen. In some places you get one or the other, but you don't get both. So I found that really useful, where, there's cutting edge research, to Juliana's point, where the material is so relevant. And then there's people who are sometimes living the case almost the day they're giving the lecture.
I take, so we have another question, and then I'm going to just allow everybody to, to say anything else that you'd like to say, mindful of the fact that we are winding up on our commitment to end at 11. Recognizing, Alfredo, what you said at the start of the program, which is that unlike perhaps other executive programs, students in the GPLLM are not pursuing the program only for the purpose of changing careers or acquiring another job, but are largely motivated by interest and being able to leverage the law and legal thinking in the work that they're doing. We have a question from somebody who's on the line, inviting any of you to describe a professional experience or opportunity that might not have been available to you had you not taken the program. And you can define experience or opportunity however you see fit for the purposes of this.
Okay, it's Julie. I can speak to blockchain. When I did my deep dive paper on blockchain and real estate. I was required to not only assess how it had penetrated real estate, but also look at opportunities. And I have a few ideas that I will be pursuing post the conclusion of my studies that I think are quite innovative, because as I said, the applied aspects of blockchain were at the tip of the iceberg. And so that's been a really, really exciting benefit to see what opportunities can come from my studies.
I can add to that. I had a product idea that was hazy a year ago in my mind, and I put it on the shelf because of this program. And now it's come back down, and I'm looking at it, and I love to build it. And so my last class I'm in right now as part of my summer semester is design thinking. So it is a beautiful launch into maybe delving into that this summer. So that's been a wonderful opportunity. I kind of forgot about that product. It's kind of been pulled off the shelf throughout the courses and hearing what's happening in the market and stuff.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Alfredo.
So I was just going to jump onto Julie's point around, I had just written a paper as well on blockchain, and I ended up submitting it to one of the most senior executives in the media and sports industry, just as a use case for it. And prior to that, I'm not even sure how I would have contemplated the complexity around something like blockchain. And so there's lots of examples, Emily. I'm not sure that's the only one. I could spend a lot of time talking about it, but that's probably the most recent one because it just happened a few weeks ago. So even most of us are fairly senior in the program, so you try to think about how this can even elevate your career even more. But there's ways that it does almost immediately. And that's just one that I just echo Julie's point on it as well.
I was just going to mention that with, coming out of the program, gave me the opportunity to look at our cybersecurity stance and kind of realize that we had missed a little bit on the legal privilege side of things. So I ended up leading a bit of a reboot of our cybersecurity programs, global cybersecurity programs, to make sure that we got the legal privilege piece right, which was a nice plus for the company and for me. I would also mention that if there are any other people senior in their organizations looking to do this, your classmates are a tremendous talent pool, and we hired at least one. Very fortunate to hire one classmate into our organization, and several others who we're continuing to talk to. So it is a rich and deep talent pool, and I know my HR department at Sun Life loves me and loves the fact that I was at the program because of the people I met.
I can echo that. So I know that one of my classmates, we were looking for a particular role, and we had some conversations. It didn't end up being the right fit for this particular individual, but just the fact that I already knew how they worked and thoughts that they were bringing to the to the classroom. I had the confidence also in recommending them for a position. So that was really fantastic. In terms of me, partway through the program, actually, I was recruited to the company that I work at the moment. And in my interviews, I distinctly remember walking by some patent applications that had been approved in the hallways and trademarks and that sort of thing. And I remember bringing that up in my interview and actually being able to speak to some of that at a far greater depth than I would have previously been able to do. And the company I work for right now is also developing sort of centralized blockchain technology. So again, having that base understanding through some of the blockchain studies I've done, coupled with HR, make me feel like I'm a much better business partner in order to be able to support the business and understand what the technology is actually doing, what the goals are.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's 11:01, and so I'm happy if there's anything else people want to say for that to happen, but I'm also very mindful of the fact that we promised both for those on the panel and those in attendance that we would wind down at 11. And so at least consistent with that commitment, I want to thank you enormously. I echo everything Dean Iacobucci has said for Jabeen and Malcolm and myself and Tally and Anne, who are also on the line. We spend most of our days working kind of in the weeds, both on programmatic issues and with our students. And it is just an enormous privilege and honor and really energizing to be back in a room with each of you. in a room with each of you, and to hear your reflections on the program. And on behalf of our team, I would say just it's an enormous honor to work both with our faculty, but importantly with all of the students who take the program. And so thank you so much for carving a good chunk of your morning aside to participate in this. We're really appreciative.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Everybody who joined us on the call this morning. If there are any questions that weren't answered, please reach out to our admissions team. We'd be happy to do so either by email or to set up calls for anybody who would like. And Jabeen and I will stick around just for a minute and two in case there are any other questions that people have that roll in.
So there's a question about whether the recording will be available. So the recording will be available. And if anyone is interested, we can send you the link. Thanks, Simone, Donna Marie, and Sherpa. Thank you for coming.
Thank you indeed. Hopefully when next we meet, we can actually speak to one another.
Sounds good, Donna. Thank you, Smuel. And thank you, Guksu. Thank you, Jermaine.
All right. I see that mostly the comments are thanks now, and we feel the same way. Thanks so much for taking the time to be with us this morning. We hope that our paths will cross again, and you should feel free, anybody who's still on the line, to reach out to us at any time. We'd be happy to chat if we can help. And until we next hear from you, we will sign off now and wish you both a wonderful rest of the afternoon and week and a fantastic weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.